And good evening, everyone. ESS, Empire State Sports, proudly presents the Wise Guy Sports Talk Show with your host tonight, Joey Riom, Dave Bartlett, myself, Pete Goslaw, and our interviewee and special guest, Jerry Manor. Welcome to the program, Jerry.
Well, thank you very much, Pete. It's certainly my pleasure to be here, especially with an old-time hockey broadcaster like you.
Yeah. Not too many hockey games, but we did some. But so I'll start it off tonight. Known Jerry for quite a few years. Actually, he is the voice of the Messina Red Raiders hockey. I'm proud to say that I was in awe one night. I did a game in Messina one night, and I was in the booth with him, and I was new, real new. I think it was my first hockey game, and I'm looking over and I'm going, these guys are freaking good. I mean, I was at awe. It's like, man, can I ever call hockey like that? I'm not a hockey guy. I'm a baseball and basketball guy, and I can call them with the best of them. But I've always been in awe, Jerry, how you two guys get along in the broadcast booth. I've had you at Salmon before when Tommy Smith and I were up there and doing games too. And so let's have Jerry introduce himself before we go any further. How's that?
All right, that sounds good. Jerry Manor, of course, and I've been doing Messina Red Raider hockey for, I hate to admit this, but 36 years.
Wow.
Started back in the season of 83, 84. And before that, I did Clarkson hockey for 8 years as well. You might think, well, why would he go from Clarkson to Messina High School? Same reason anybody does anything, money. Believe it or not, they were willing to pay me more money to do high school hockey than college hockey. So I ended up in Messina. And I'm glad I did because as I, got married, had a family, the high school season is a lot easier to deal with than the college season.
That's true.
So, it was a pleasure, but I got my start actually back when I was in college. I went to SUNY Potsdam, and I was walking through the student union one day, and there's this sign on the bulletin board that says, "Hey, we're looking for people to work at the radio station." So I'd never even thought about doing radio before, but I said, boy, that sounds like fun. I like music. So I signed up. And those of you who are familiar with college radio, basically the way it works, you have 4 or 5 people that do most of the work, and then the rest of the staff does a shift a month. They do a music show a month.
Yeah.
So I started working there, got hooked on it immediately, absolutely loved it. It was called WRPS up at SUNY Potsdam. For Radio Potsdam State, because that's what we used to call Potsdam then. And I started working there, and I did a little bit of everything, but we started to dabble in sports. And the fun part was that's when Potsdam State, as I called it, had a pretty darn good basketball team. And I got a chance to do some of those games. I was horrible, but I was just getting started. And then they had a club hockey team, and they actually became a regular hockey team, an NCAA Division III team. In fact, my current partner was their coach, Dave McLennan. So I did a few of those games, and then one night I got a call. This woman I knew, her husband worked with my dad. My dad was a state trooper, and her husband was a state trooper, but she worked at the Potsdam radio station. She said, "Hey, we're looking for some part-time people. Would you like to work part-time, nights, weekends, whenever we need you?" Well, of course, when you're a college student, that's when you can work. So I started working there at WPDM in Potsdam. And, I started working part-time. And when I graduated from college, they offered me a full-time position. But that's where I got started really doing hockey, because I don't know if you guys remember him, but you remember Con Elliott?
Vaguely.
Absolutely.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Con was the voice of Clarkson hockey back in the day and the voice of local sports, basically. So I used to help him with local sports, doing high school basketball, a little bit of high school hockey. We did, a lot of different high school sports. And then he was doing Clarkson hockey, but I wasn't involved in that. But I managed to weasel my way in. I would take the equipment and set it up and then step back. And he and sometimes John Shatraw, or there's a bunch of guys that would do the games with him. Well, one day somebody couldn't show up, so I got to go on the air with him. And eventually he got older and didn't want to do the road trips. So, I mean, who wants to go out to North Dakota or, all these other places? So that's how I got on the air doing hockey play-by-play. Then I got a call from Vic Perry. You remember Vic at WMSA?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Of course, Victor got promoted to station manager, and WMSA is a union station, so he could no longer do hockey. So they were looking, because Sandy Cook, you all remember Sandy.
Absolutely.
Sandy had the football lockdown, but they were looking for somebody to do hockey, and Vic knew that I did hockey, so they offered me the job, and that was in 1983. And I'm still there doing, although I work at CCOM now full time. That's my real job, but I still do hockey in the wintertime. But I love it. It's great. It's fun.
Yeah, I was going to throw that in, but we'll throw that in later. But anyway, how convenient though to come right out of college and have a job like that. I mean, and it really didn't have to go far, Jerry.
No, I know. It was total good luck. I mean, they were looking for a part-timer. Now, part-timers in those days, at a radio station, you had to have somebody there if you were on the air. You couldn't be automated the way they are now. So you had to have somebody at the station. So they were broadcasting from 6 a.m. until midnight. So there were lots of night hours to work. There were lots of weekend hours. In fact, I used to work on Sundays from noon to midnight because I think it was, anywhere between 5:30 and 8 o'clock, the AM station would sign off. It was a daytime station, but they had an FM as well, and that stayed on till midnight. But the FM was run by an automation machine. But back in those days, the automation machine was this big, huge thing with big, giant reel-to-reels for the music. And they had the carts. Pete, you remember the carts for the commercials. And it had a big carousel. So it would rotate around and play the commercials, and the music would spin, and it was all, it was automated, but somebody had to be there to babysit it. So, I got a lot of hours in, and, that's how I worked my way through college, was working part-time, which usually was a lot of hours.
Yeah, I did, actually, I was the studio guy for Polly Walbridge at WICY for a while, working at nights. And that's where I learned a little bit of, the back door of what everybody does in the studio. So
yeah,
it came in handy. But so there you have quite a resume, Jerry. I mean, there's so many things we could talk about tonight. You've done numerous on-site MCs for Hall of Fames and everything else. And if you can just elaborate on those before we go back into the sports thing, and get the business part out of it, and then we could talk more about sports, of course.
Okay. The one thing I do want to mention in sports before we move on, because I'll forget it if I don't mention it when I'm thinking of it.
It's your show.
But you mentioned, running the board. And back when I worked in Potsdam, the station, WPDM, used to carry the Montreal Expos. And the Expos, I got a chance to run the board for the Expos games. That's when Dave Van Horn and Duke Snyder were doing the games, and they were terrific. But one of the fringe benefits of that, the station got free tickets to the ball games. And I remember I used to go to Montreal all the time. I remember one summer we went up to 17 games. But the best part was I got to go to the All-Star game when it was in Montreal. And I got to go down on the field during batting practice. I met Duke Snyder, Dave Van Horn. I met Gary Carter, Andre Dawson. I met a bunch of the Expos. But I was standing there watching batting practice, and Robin Yount, from Milwaukee was up, and he foul-tipped one. It was coming right at me, so I just reached up and grabbed it and barehanded it. And my youngest brother still has that ball. But after I made the catch, this old guy yells out, he says, "Hey, young feller, nice catch." So the buddy I was with said, "You know who that was? It was Pee Wee Reese." Oh. So, I mean, the radio deal has gotten me a lot of great things, but it also helped me get the job that I have now, because the fact that I was in radio means I'm not afraid to talk to people. And, I do a lot of remotes, or used to do a lot of remotes for the radio station. And, we were basically everywhere. WMSA did a remote for everything. You know, we
Mhm.
used to do the hospital radiothon every year. We do remotes everywhere. So when CCOM was looking for, you know, like a PR guy type marketing, they called me up and offered me the job. So I've been one of those lucky people. I've never actually had to apply for a job in my life. They've always been offered to me, which is kind of lucky, really, when you
Yeah,
think
it's
about it.
kind of convenient. So let's go into CCOM. So you're a business development manager. That's the title you have, or?
Yeah, that's my title. I started out, well, business development is part of marketing, okay? And when I first came to CCOM in 2002, it was just me in the marketing department. But of course, we've grown a bit since then and we've expanded. So I moved over to the business development side, interact with people and, you know, talk about business and try to get them to join the credit union as a business, you know, to take out loans with the credit union and so on. That's part of my job. The other part, though, which I really enjoy, is financial literacy. And I have the opportunity to go out to speak to classes in school, to senior citizen groups, to all kinds of different people about budgeting and credit scores and credit reports and identity theft and things like that. And usually on an average year, I'll do 85 to 90 different presentations in various areas. So that's a lot of fun. Of course, I enjoy talking in front of people, so it's not too bad.
Right. I know you visited me once for opening up
I
an
did.
account, opening an account. So you came to Fort Cowden, and so I remember that.
Yeah,
Is
you were nice to me too, I think.
well, of course. Actually, I was startled actually when you came in the door. It's like, what is Jerry doing here?
Yeah.
I kind of, but I guess
Yep.
that's one of your jobs too, to go meet new people like that, or?
That's right. That's right. It's been great. And since we've expanded, you know, we expanded over to Clinton County in Plattsburgh. We have a branch over there now. And just recently, we opened a branch in South Burlington, Vermont. So I've had the opportunity to travel a lot. Now, we have since hired a person for me in Plattsburgh, so I don't have to go there as frequently as I used to, because that's a long drive. I mean, you got to, yeah, especially if you're going to Burlington, you got to allow yourself 3 hours each way. And that's a good part of the day.
Yeah,
But
oh yeah.
I still get around. Well, obviously not right now.
Right.
I'm basically working out of my office right now, but I'd much rather be out on the road, actually out talking to people in person. And I mean, this Zoom thing it works okay, but it's not the same as talking in person.
No, it's not. No. So, Jerry, what are you doing besides work? What are you doing with your downtime to prepare for sports? Because right now, none of us are doing anything. Or I'd be out watching a game or doing something at a, somewhere. So,
Well, you know, the first thing, of course, I missed was the college hockey playoffs.
mhm.
And I usually watch them. In fact, we had reservations in Lake Placid. You know, I was expecting Clarkson to do really well this year. And we were, you know, I had my reservations up there. We were going to go, and it ended up getting canceled, just like the high school states did. I was ready for that too, and they got canceled at the last minute. So usually by now I'd be watching the NHL, you know, but I watch a lot of hockey. And you know, during the summer, I don't really do that much when it comes to sports. You know, I'm pretty much just a hockey guy when it comes to actually broadcasting.
I know you do some camping. I see that online once in a while. You spend a lot of time with family. That's got to be tough during this virus issue. What are you doing to keep
Yeah,
yourself busy as far as that? I mean, it must be a lot of.
mostly I've been working around the house, basically doing the things that I never seem to have time to do. But that's getting kind of old. And I'm glad, I guess this weekend we're going into phase one of the reopening.
Yeah.
And that's kind of good news. And, you know, I'm a firm believer in this being careful, but I'm glad to hear that we're starting to open up. And as far as camping's concerned, I love to camp. And we do usually a couple of canoe trips up in the Adirondacks every year. And my wife has a horse, so we do horse camping over at Otter Creek over in Lewis County. And, you know, my brother lives over near Plattsburgh, actually near Dannemora. And he has the old family farm, and he's got a place, the back corner of the farm, where we do some camping over there. Also like canoeing. So we get out in the summertime when it's nice.
So I don't know if the other fellows want to jump in or not. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I'm going back to hockey, Jerry,
Okay.
if you don't mind. But when you mentioned your first year as 1983-84, then that means that you have broadcasted every one of the Mickey Locke versus Messina Red Raider hockey games except for one, because he started in 1982-83,
Yeah.
which is just, those are mind-boggling numbers.
Well, Dave and I were talking about it. When you sit back and look at how many Messina Potsdam games we did over the years, or even more Messina Canton games, because it always seemed like, you do two during the regular season, then you'd have one in the playoffs, and that was
Right.
every single year. And so yeah, but I've done with Mickey's teams, and the guy that stands out in my mind, and there are a lot of great players at St. Lawrence Central. And, every year, Dave and I love talking to Mick and Randy Roy. I mean, they've been doing it as long as we have, longer, and we enjoy talking to them. But the guy that sticks in my mind is Chris Bernard. Chris, of course, he was a great goaltender at St. Lawrence Central and in a line of great goaltenders at St. Lawrence Central. But there was something about him in his, I guess you could say, personality. Because when we go into the rink at St. Lawrence Central, he would, if he was on the ice, he would skate right over to us to say hello and chat with us. And you don't see too many high school players that do that. And of course, he since went on to be a walk-on at Clarkson and play Clarkson, and now he's the coach at SUNY Potsdam. And every time I see him now, he always makes a point to come over, say hello, and chat. But a lot of great players at St. Lawrence Central, and they did their share of beating Messina over the years. I have to give them credit for that.
Well, as their athletic director, it's the one game, just like football, it's the one game they get fired up for every year is Messina. So, it's funny you mentioned that about Chris. Chris is coming on at some point within the next couple of weeks, and Pete and I interviewed him 6 years ago when we did this show as more of a podcast, and you're right. Pete, Dave, and I will probably get one question each. He'll take care of the rest of the show all by himself.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I've kind of done that too, so I can't say too much about
No, but that's not what I'm going on. I'm like, Chris, there's tons of things that we can be asking you here, and he knows that he like reads your mind and knows what the next question's going to be, and so I don't know. I mean, you've done so many games, but now that you mention it, I remember it was probably Chris's senior year, if not his junior year, because obviously St. Lawrence Central and Messina only play once a year, and it's
Right.
home and away every other year. I want to say his senior year, I remember a game where Messina came in, beat us like 3-0, but he stopped like 64 shots, something outrageous. I don't know if you recall that or not, but I just remember him that night being unconscious.
Well,
he
I
had to have
remember
faced at least
talking with
50
Dave.
shots.
Yeah, we were thinking, is he going to get to 60 saves? I mean, that was the question. And I can't remember for sure whether he did or not, but they put the rubber on him, that's for sure.
Yeah,
but I tell you,
and I want to say it was a 2 or 3-0 game, and he had over 50 saves.
Yeah, it wasn't a blowout, that's for sure. It wasn't a blowout.
No. It was a good game. It was a quality game. So, and I guess the other thing, as it pertains to this, I got to tell you, as a guy that who really only listens to Messina hockey when we're involved, if I'm in the car, I might listen to you a little bit, Jerry. But I got to say, you make if I can't be at a St. Lawrence Central Messina game, you make it so much more enjoyable. It's a quality broadcast, and I think Pete and Dave would say the same. I'm sure I don't think you get enough credit for. I think you're taken for granted. I think you've just been around so long and done it so well. You're the Vin Scully of hockey around here, and it's enjoyable to listen to. I think you're that good. So I just want to say thank you from St. Lawrence Central fans for that one game a year that you get to do us, and any other games that you tossed in for us throughout the years, because I think you did some others for us that weren't.
Yes, we did.
So we always appreciated that, because we're like, geez, we got the real voice of hockey in the North Country doing our games. So
Oh, Joey, I appreciate that. And you know, when you say Vin Scully, oh my God, he is my all-time favorite baseball announcer. Now, being an Expos fan, I love Dave Van Horn, but you know, Vin Scully, he is the best. And you know, you're probably going to ask me this, who my favorite hockey announcer is. Well, I'll ask it for myself. Of course, I grew up over near Plattsburgh, near Dannemora, and back in the day, you know, Danny Gallivan. I mean, everybody loved Danny Gallivan, but I'll tell you what, I don't think there's anybody better than Doc Emmerich. I just think he is the best play-by-play announcer when it comes to hockey. I just love listening to him. And I occasionally steal a little bit of something from him too.
I think
and again,
we all steal from everybody. So
Yeah.
sorry, Joe.
Again, and I'm not a no, that's okay. But I'm not a huge hockey guy. But when he's doing a game, I'll put it in the background just to listen to him because of that voice, because of the knowledge. You know, it's just, and that's what I'm looking for. There was nothing better. I think all you guys would say that. Dave Van Horn, Vin Scully, any of those great baseball announcers, you may not even cared about what was going on in the game. It was so nice listening to baseball on the radio just to hear that voice in the background and tell the occasional story. It was just so soothing. So that's what I look for in my announcers. I think you provide that. And if Doc Emmerich is one of your favorites, I mean, I can understand why, because I think he does that himself.
Yeah, he's great. He is really good. But, you know, I've been fortunate over the years to have some great people to work with. You know, one of them being the guy I work with now, Dave McLennan, who, you know, I always like to joke, he forgot more about hockey than I know. He's amazing. But before that, I worked with Reggie Cross for a while. Reggie did a great job. And somebody you know pretty well, all of you, Tim Hayes, has helped me out on occasion. And he's had a chance to do a few state championship games with me because normally by the time we get to the state championship, you know, Dave, my partner's in Florida or in Arizona or somewhere in California, but Tim always steps in and does a great job for me. In fact, we were set to go to Buffalo this year. It didn't happen.
So, Jerry, you know, with your many years of broadcasting hockey, is there a particular season that stands out in your mind as being more enjoyable or more exciting or more memorable?
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to 2008, 7-8.
Okay.
And that's the year Messina won the state championship. That's the year Matt Hatch was a senior. And, you know, they were one of the favorites, but they had a rough time of it because they had to go down to Section 1 in the quarterfinals. But before that all started, you know, there were some tough sectional games they had to get through, but they did. And they end up going down and taking on Mamaroneck out of Section 1. And that year they had a really good team. And we went down, and the place they play, Hummocks Ice Arena. Well, let me say this. We are so fortunate up here to have the beautiful facilities we have for the kids to play hockey in. Of course, you know, I'm a little bit biased, but the Messina Arena, you know, they don't come any better than that for high school hockey. But Tri-Town Arena is terrific. Salmon River, Tom Cavanaugh, what a great facility that is. The Dome in Ogdensburg. I mean, we could just go on and on with great facilities. When you get downstate, not so much. You know, sometimes they play in a college rink and that's fine, but most of the municipal rinks are really not very nice. So Hummocks is not very nice. And they were expecting that they were going to win. So they had a big, huge crowd, and the crowd wasn't very friendly. And they didn't like the coach, or at least the staff at the arena didn't like the coach. But anyway, we'll not get into that. But we ended up broadcasting from the top of the snack bar because that's how we could get away from the crowd. It was such a loud, huge, well, not huge crowd, but for that building, it was huge. But Messina ended up winning it in overtime. You know, then they go on to, I was at Utica at the time, which is where the state hockey playoffs should be, in Utica. Mm-hmm. But anyway, So then they had to play, I'm trying to remember who they played in the semifinals. I'm not sure, but they didn't have too much of a tough time winning the semifinal. But then they're playing West Genesee in the championship. The game went to 3 overtimes before Messina finally won it. But what a great game that was. So that's one of the seasons that sticks in my mind. But, the 2014 season when they won the state championship was a good one because they had to beat Pittsford in the semifinals, and that's a game that went to overtime. And it's interesting, Tyler Young, who was just named the SUNY Potsdam Hockey Player of the Year, scored the winning goal in that game. He was the captain of the Messina team that year. So, there's all these connections in hockey. And, over the years, I've seen a lot of exciting games. One of the really exciting ones was against Salmon River. Ended up a 0-0 tie.
Oh,
That's
my.
the only 0-0 tie I've ever seen. It was Messina Salmon River. It's a great game at the Salmon River Arena. So yeah, lots of great games over the years.
Yeah, and being a basketball player, but I always followed our hockey team very closely, and I always, we were in a different division from Messina, but that was always a big contest.
Well, it seems like everybody's big game of the year was the game against Messina. And,
Yeah.
Everybody brought their A game to play Messina. Here's another kind of a little funny story for you. This was back when Stan Moore was still coaching Messina, and they were playing at Alex Bay. That's when Alex Bay had their own team, and they were playing Messina at the Alex Bay Arena, which is an ice box, or it used to be, not so much anymore because they have that radiant heat in there now. But back then it was really cold. But Messina was playing Alex Bay, and Messina was like the game against Brazier where Messina, outshot them like 70-20, but Alex Bay won the game. As far as I know, that's the only time, 6-5, and that's the only time they've ever beaten Messina. But the goaltender for Alex Bay is a guy's name you might recognize. He ran for Congress here a few years ago, Matt Doheny. And I ran into him at an event, and we got talking, and he said, I recognize how do I know you? So I told him, I said, I do the Messina hockey. He goes, hey, he said, I was the goalie the only time we ever beat Messina. So, it's interesting how that continues. Now, obviously things are not the way they used to be. The other areas of the state have come up. There's no question about it.
Mm-hmm.
Buffalo has very strong high school hockey teams. Section 1 down around the city, strong teams. Section 3, Syracuse area, strong teams. But they still want to come and play Messina, even now. And we always give them a game.
Mm.
I know for a fact when Salmon River and Messina were on a schedule, wherever it was, the place was packed, and people got there early. So
yeah,
it was definitely.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, it was definitely a crosstown. I mean, Salmon River had 2 teams, actually 3, if you want to spread it out, that they wanted to play. That was Messina, Malone, and St. Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 3 big ones that it drew. And I'll tell you what, there was problems in the stands sometimes amongst fans. So I know that very well. But so I guess Dave started it off with the favorite or your best season. So can you differentiate against a best season, best team, and best player that you've ever seen from Messina? I'm gonna put you on the spot, Jerry.
Oh boy. That was a great season, but that may not have been the best Messina team. I remember the team way back in I think it was 92, 93. The Cameron boys were on the team. They ended up winning the state championship, beating Saratoga Springs in the state finals 10-0. And they had a great team that year. As far as players, oh my goodness, I've seen so many great players come out of Messina. Of course, I mentioned Matt Hatch already, just a terrific player. Mike Hurlbutt. Mike was a senior my first year doing Messina hockey. So, he had a great season or a great career with St. Lawrence University, and he also played some professional hockey. I mentioned Tyler Young. He was a terrific high school player. I can't name them all. There were so many of them. There were a lot of great players. And now I know the ones that are watching this, I don't mention them. I'm going to hear from them.
Yeah,
No,
that's why I put you on the spot. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But no,
As
I've seen
you
a lot of great
should.
players.
As you should.
What's that, David? He's fading in and out again. He's on mute.
He's on mute.
Yeah. Yeah, he said 1 second. I don't know what was going on there. But anyway, so you've done a lot of traveling for the Red Raiders all over the place. And I just can't imagine. I've done a lot of venues too. Dave and I have been on the Final Four floor down in Hudson Valley for the girls' games. Probably one of the best places I've ever broadcast in my life. It was fantastic down there. So all the venues that you've gone to, besides Messina, what's your favorite? What's your favorite place to broadcast from?
Of all the places I've been to, my favorite place to broadcast from, besides the Messina Arena, would be Ogdensburg, believe it or not. And I'll tell you why. Because the way it's set up, the fans are all one side, but there's no press box. But there's that big platform on the one side of the ice.
Yeah.
So you put a table there. You're right at the red line. You can see everything perfectly. Plus, the Golden Dome is warm. So it's perfect. So I do enjoy broadcasting from Ogdensburg. Salmon River is great too. The only thing about Salmon is it's a glassed-in press box. So you don't get the ambiance of the game as well as you do in an open-air press box like Messina or, say, in Ogdensburg. But as far as around the states, I'm just trying to think. The arena at West Genesee is pretty nice too. They've got a beautiful facility there, and they've got actually 2 press boxes. In fact, we would always come there for the first tournament of the season, and it was pretty crowded in the one press box. So one year we walk in, and the coach, Frank Calabutho, says to me, he says, "Hey, look, we built a press box for you guys." So in the other press box. So, but that's a nice place too. It's called Shove Park Arena in Camillus, where West Jenny plays. That's really nice. But some of the other ones, this past season, we went down to play where Pelham plays, down in what's the name of that town? I can't even think of the name of it. It's just up outside the Bronx.
Yeah.
But it's one of those inflatable domes. Not very nice.
No.
Not compared to what we have up here. So, all my favorite ones are up in the North Country because we have the best rinks.
I noticed the one night I went out there to Messina. I was sitting up there and I'm going, damn, it's cold in here. And for some reason, it's open booth up there. And I'm sitting there going, how are these guys surviving over there? And I think you guys had a little radiant heater underneath, didn't you? Underneath there?
Of course.
I'm going,
Yeah.
Jesus, I didn't get that. I mean, I was.
Are you sure we didn't give you one?
Oh, you might. I don't know. I maybe during a timeout, but I tell you what, it was kind of cool up there. It reminded me of the old Malone rink.
Oh, yeah.
which was cold as hell. I mean, but it was terrible at one point. But thank God for the warm rooms, I guess.
Well, Alex Bay used to be extremely cold, very cold.
Yeah.
And then they put the radiant heat in. It's a gas-fired radiant heat, and now it's really comfortable in there. That's a nice little rink to do a game from, and now that it's not as cold as it used to be.
Yeah, there were several rinks. The old Tri-Town Arena, back when I was a youngster, that was a cold place.
Yeah. I better go turn the light on here so you can still see me. Hold on, I'll be right back.
Yeah, we're losing you.
Tri-Town Arena. Tri-Town
Starting
Arena
to get dark now.
What's that, Joe?
There she goes. Okay.
I was just going to say, old Tri-Town Arena, new Tri-Town Arena, whatever Tri-Town Arena, it's freezing in there. So
Okay.
it's still cold in there.
Okay.
Norfolk can be pretty cold too.
All right.
Yeah. Well, and our boys played at Norwood Norfolk, and I had never been in Dominic Zappi Arena and went because of being the AD, and I was freezing, just freezing. But I'm Pete, Dave, and I, we're soft basketball guys. We're not. We're used to 80 degrees and comfortable, and
Yeah. Couple of funny rink stories. Messina, back in the day, Section 7, the Plattsburgh section, used to be in with Section 10 in hockey. So Messina would have to play Plattsburgh High School, Seton Catholic, or St. John's before they were Seton Catholic, MAI, but also Northeast Clinton. Now, Northeast Clinton is in Rouse's Point, and that Rouse's Point arena is right on Lake Champlain, and that's one darn cold arena. So back when we were doing the game, my grandmother used to live near Dannemora. So when we'd go over to a game in that neck of the woods, I'd go early and have dinner with her before going to do the game. Well, it just so happened a couple of my cousins one was from Virginia and one was from Connecticut were up, and they wanted to come to the game with me. I said, go, great. They lasted about 5 minutes, and they had to go across the street to get a drink because it was so cold in that arena. But that's one of the cold ones. And then we did a game down in Ithaca. Now, normally when the high school plays in Ithaca, now they play at Lina Rink at Cornell. But there's also a town rink that's right on the lake, and it's open air. It's got the roof, but it's got open air, and oh my goodness, that one can be cold too. Haven't done a game in there in a long time. Thank goodness.
I can imagine. I was just
It's funny. Joe says we're soft basketball guys. I grew up playing hockey and then started playing basketball. There was a point in time where you got to make a choice, and I was actually a pretty good hockey player, but let's see, shorts and 80-degree gym or some of these really cold arenas back then. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll wear shorts.
Yeah, see, I was a basketball player when I was in high school. Now, I wasn't very good, but I did play basketball. I started out, my first year, I went to Saranac Central, and then my dad was transferred to Canton, so I ended up going to Potsdam and graduating. And I played on the Potsdam team, but basically, I was a great practice player. But when I got in a game, I must be the nerves or whatever. I just wasn't a good game player, but I get in occasionally. But my claim to fame in my high school career was I stole the ball from Hal Cohen.
Oh.
Remember Hal Cohen?
Yeah.
I stole the ball from Hal Cohen. That's the only thing I actually did good in my high school career. But of course, I got in the game because Canton was way ahead of us. So
I would tell that story forever.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, sure. I do want to mention one thing about this 80-degree inside weather that Joey keeps talking about, but I've done a lot of games at St. Lawrence Central, and that corner he sticks me in, sometimes there's frost on the door. I'm here to tell you that. So it's not all 80 degrees.
Well, I get a little hot, so I remember you used to hear the stories of Bob Knight, John Wooden, making sure the locker rooms were certain temperatures. I make sure that things are to my liking. So
just fix your job.
Yeah. I mean, you see how I run up and down the sidelines, Pete. So I get a little hot, so I need it cold over there in that corner.
Yeah,
cool me down.
I've never seen you inside the sideline, so I mean, they should count you as a sixth man.
Right.
Hey, Jerry.
Yeah.
I gotta ask something. Gotta go off the hockey for just a second.
Sure.
And you gotta tell some old WMSA. I am I wrong? I remember you doing the afternoon shift, DJing on the afternoon shift. I remember trivia once an hour back in those days. Do you remember that? Yeah, that was a big deal to us. We had nothing else to do but listen to radio, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait for the trivia question. you'd only let us win once a month.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Such a
Yeah,
ripoff.
You know, radio, I was so lucky, guys, to be in radio when I was in radio, because that's when radio was great. Now it's all syndicated or voice tracked. You know, you don't have people there anymore. There's, you know, the few stations that are still local and live are great. You know, like for instance, CKON, you know, they do a great job. In Malone, WICY, in Potsdam, it's still B99.3, and there's their country station. But even some of that is canned. You know, back in the day when I started, you had to be on the air live. You actually did a show. You were there, and it was great. But MSA was a pretty funny place to work. Of course, you guys all remember Sandy Cook, and I'll tell
Great
you
friend.
what, he was amazing. But there's a couple of good Sandy stories. One of them involves St. Lawrence Central, of all things. And Messina was playing at St. Lawrence Central in football. And St. Lawrence Central was ahead most of the game. It looked like they were going to win. And Messina came back and made a great play to get the winning touchdown late. I don't remember the entire circumstances. But, you know, Sandy just went berserk. I mean, totally bananas, yelling and screaming. And of course, you had no idea what he was saying because he was totally over-modulating. And it was just completely, you know, bonkers for about a minute and a half. Well, he takes a breath, and Charlie Boots was working with him. He was his analyst at the time. So Sandy takes a breath, and Charlie just says, deadpan. And now if you want to know what happened, well, I drove off the road. I was laughing so hard. Sandy was hilarious. He really was. We had some fun over the years. And again, you know, I had a chance to do a lot of remotes. We used to go to field days and, you know, the hospital stuff. So those were the days when radio was really community minded. And some of them still are, but it's not the same as it used to be. It just isn't, because the costs are too high. And there are so many stations now. You know, back when I broke in the 70s, there was one station in Potsdam, one station in Messina. You know, well, there's two, because there's YBG too, and one in Malone, one in Ogdensburg. Now there are about 15 everywhere. So what it does is cuts up the advertising pie into little pieces, so you can't afford to pay anybody anymore. So that it's a sad thing what's happened in radio, but it still is effective though. And you know, it's lucky that we're still able to do the things we do, like the hockey and like the other sports the stations do. PDM, B99, they do a lot of great local sports.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Angle does a wonderful job for them.
So, yeah, we had Chris on. Chris was our second show of this little read. Yeah, and we have Java Joel Murphy coming on in a couple of weeks. So he will give us a really good idea of what radio is now, because he's in the middle of it, living in Cleveland and turning his show out in syndication. So so we're kind of I'm excited about that show, because I'm a radio geek. I love radio, and to hear you just tell those little stories about MSA. I mean, that's what I grew up on as a kid, because we didn't have anything else to do but listen to the radio. So,
you know, my parents had it on all the time. On the weekends, they had the swap show.
Oh yeah.
The extravaganza from Sandy Cook. My mother used to, she used to play Name That Tune with Sandy on there. He'd have a couple. She'd go over there and she'd listen to it and a couple dings, and she'd shut it off and she'd go, I know that song, and she'd put it back on, and she sang to everything. You're right. It has changed so much, the format. It's unbelievable. I remember when I was working with WICY, of course, I was just the back man for Paul, but they do very little talking, and most of it's computer generated, like you said. Now it's all voiceover. So a lot of things have changed. So I did want.
Speaking of Paul, there's another great guy too.
I didn't hear him.
Who was that?
I said, speaking of Paul Walbridge, there's another great guy too. And now he and his daughter are working together, and they're doing a great job.
We had Paulie on the show years ago, back in 2014. He's another one where there wasn't enough time. We could have stayed for a couple hours that night and talked to him too. So there wasn't enough time in the night. Um, so Jerry, before we're winding down on time, I wanted to pick your brain a lot more. All the hockey you've seen, have you seen the hockey turn for the better, or do you think that it should be back in the old days? Because there's a lot of mixed feelings about out there that the rougher, tougher of years ago was better versus the fast game they have now. So I'll let you describe what you think is the better hockey.
Well, I have to be, I love the old time hockey. I loved, the rough and tumble. But the way things are now, the hockey is just fantastic because these guys are huge. But boy, can they skate. They're fast and they can handle the puck. I mean, it's amazing how good they are. It really is. Now, granted, when you go back to the original six, you're not going to ever beat that. But it's different. And that's the thing. Things change, things get different. Are they better or not? I don't know. I myself prefer the speed game, the fast game. But, I enjoy seeing a rough and tumble game as well. So it all depends.
I think we've all got
there's a lot of great hockey memories out there. Of course, I got to go back to 1980. Remember what happened in 1980 in hockey?
Olympics, yeah.
I was there.
Who could forget? Yeah, Joe was there.
I should have been there. I had the opportunity to be there because we had a press pass that's when I was working in Potsdam, and I could have gone up except for one thing. Clarkson was on the road that weekend at Princeton, and they had gone down on Friday, and St. Lawrence was playing Princeton Friday night, and Clarkson was playing them Saturday night. So Clarkson was in town but didn't have a game. So we went to the St. Lawrence game. It was a late afternoon game, and we were going to just go back and watch the USA-Russia game on the TV because it was tape delayed. Well, didn't they announce the score at the St. Lawrence game? So we already knew. But fortunately, on the way back, we stopped at a ground round near Syracuse and watched the Finland game, the game that actually won them the gold medal. So, that's another hockey story. I got a lot of hockey stories.
I bet you do.
Jerry, we're gonna go ahead, Joey.
Well, it's something when our boys were in the state Final Four just a few years ago, 2016, 2017. I just remember seeing the sign in the Harbor Center of the past winners, and it struck me. And I don't know if maybe you can recall this, but the year that Olympics in USA won the gold, Lake Placid High School won the state championships in hockey.
Yeah.
So like within a month from that exciting situation of United States in the Olympics going on, Lake Placid hockey wins the state championship in hockey. Do you recall any of that? Because I just remember that being mind-boggling to me, because I wouldn't have remembered that. I was only 10 years old at the time. So
yeah, and that's a few years before I started doing Messina hockey, but I do remember that. And that was the first year that they had an actual high school playoff championship. Before that, they used to vote on the champions. But so Lake Placid won the first one, and it was certainly exciting for them, and especially after having gone through the Olympic situation. And it's unfortunate. The hockey's gone downhill as far as high school in Saranac Lake and Lake Placid. They've combined teams, and I guess they were pretty decent this year. But I remember those battle royals between Messina and Lake Placid back in the day. Oh my goodness, back when the Stracks were playing, and those are great hockey games. But it's a numbers game, and that's the thing about hockey, high school or whatever. It's a numbers game. When I came to Messina in 1983, there were over 600 players in Messina minor hockey. Over 600. Now, I don't even know if they have 100.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, Messina always had good numbers. That's for sure. They had a good slew to choose from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, even like Salmon River with North Franklin, we had at every age level we had like 4 house teams and a traveling team.
Right.
You know,
Right. Now they don't have that anymore. So it's a
No.
lot tougher, especially when you're dealing with some of the city areas where they have a lot to choose from.
right?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Jerry, our time has come to an end here tonight. I'm sure we could talk for hours. Um, uh, Quite honored that you came on tonight. I've always wanted to interview you. But the night that I sat beside you in the booth in Messina, I was in awe of you guys right out the bat, and I said I want to interview these guys eventually, and I'm very glad you came on tonight.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. There's a lot of people backing me up, though. Of course, my partner, Dave McLennan, does a wonderful job. And my wife, Sally, keeps the stats for me. So, we know what's going on all the time. And of course, if the station didn't sell the advertising and give me a chance to be on the air, I wouldn't be able to do it either. So a lot of people involved. It's not just me. I'm just the lucky one that gets to go out and actually do it.
That's great. That's great. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, Jerry. Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
My
Jerry.
pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Jerry.
Really a pleasure to talk to both of you, all 3 of you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, good. I hope everybody enjoyed our show tonight. For Joey Ream, Dave Bartlett, myself, Pete Goslaw, and our special guest, Jerry Manor. That's it for tonight. We hope everybody stays safe out there. Good night, everybody.
Live long and prosper.